Alayna Ertl was just 5 years old, a bright, joyful child with her whole life ahead of her. Zachary Anderson was a trusted family friend, welcomed into her home without hesitation. Within hours, that trust would be shattered forever in one of Minnesota's most horrifying crimes. Watkins, Minnesota, was the kind of town where doors were left unlocked and neighbors waved from their porches. Life moved at a slow, predictable pace, the kind that made people feel safe. On the evening of August 19, 2016, the Ertl family, Alan, his wife Lisa, and their 5-year-old daughter Alayna, enjoyed a calm Friday night together. They had invited over a family friend, Zachary Anderson, someone Alan worked with on the local football team. He had visited a few times before, and there was never any reason to feel uneasy about him. He was quiet, polite, and always seemed grateful for the company. They had pizza for dinner. Alayna, full of energy as usual, danced around the living room while the adults chatted. She had a favorite doll she took everywhere, and it wasn't long before she tucked it under her arm and started showing Zachary how well it could talk. Everyone laughed. The little girl was bright and curious, the kind of child that brought joy wherever she went. As the evening wore on, Lisa got Alayna ready for bed. She kissed her daughter good night, tucked her in under the soft pink blanket, and turned off the lights. Nothing felt off. Nothing seemed wrong. Zachary had a few drinks with Alan. They sat up talking about football, about work, about nothing in particular. Eventually, both men got tired. Zachary was staying in the guest room, something he had done before without issue. The family dog barked once around midnight, but it didn't seem important at the time. Lisa assumed it was a raccoon or something harmless outside. She hushed the dog and went back to bed. The next morning, the air felt still. Lisa woke up first. She noticed the house was unusually quiet. The guest room door was open, the bed unslept in, the front door was unlocked. Her stomach dropped. She rushed to Alayna's room and found the bed empty. The blanket was pulled back, the pillow slightly indented. Alayna was gone. Alan woke to the sound of Lisa's panic. They checked every corner of the house, closets, basement, garage, but Alayna wasn't there. Her favorite doll was gone too. Zachary's belongings were missing, including his keys, phone, and wallet. Outside, the truck he had arrived in was nowhere to be seen. It felt like waking up in someone else's nightmare. In a matter of hours, their lives had been flipped upside down. The 911 call came in at 8:04 a.m. Police responded immediately. Within an hour, an Amber Alert was issued across Minnesota. Alayna's photo, blonde hair, wide smile, bright eyes, was broadcast on every local station. Volunteers from all over started arriving in Watkins, ready to help. The sheriff stood on the Ertls' porch and gave a short press conference. Alayna's name was now known beyond their small town. What started as an ordinary family evening had become the beginning of a horrifying mystery. No one could have imagined that a trusted friend would vanish in the night with a child. In a town where almost nothing ever went wrong, the unthinkable had just happened, and it was only the beginning. By sunrise, the town of Watkins was in motion. News of Alayna Ertl's disappearance spread rapidly. The flashing lights of patrol cars reflected off storefront windows as officers canvassed the area. Neighbors stood on their lawns, confused and concerned. People who had never met the Ertl family felt a personal sting. Things like this weren't supposed to happen in places like this. The Amber Alert system was activated within hours. Alayna's photo, showing her smiling in a flowered dress, was shared on news stations, highway signs, and social media feeds. The alert included a description of Zachary Anderson and his white GMC Sierra pickup truck. Police believed she had been taken sometime between midnight and 8 a.m., a window that now felt terrifyingly wide. Authorities feared the longer she was gone, the more unlikely a safe return would be. Volunteers began arriving by the dozens. Some came with maps, some with flashlights, others with dogs. The community gathered at the local school, which was converted into a makeshift command center. People brought coffee, snacks, and hand-drawn flyers. Fields were searched, ditches were combed, and barns were inspected one by one. Strangers became teammates, united by one urgent hope: to find Alayna alive. Investigators worked quickly behind the scenes. Cell phone towers were pinged. Security cameras from gas stations and businesses were reviewed. They learned that Zachary had not just vanished. He had taken steps to avoid being found. His phone had been shut off just after 2 a.m., and his social media accounts were silent. His work history revealed no immediate red flags, but something about the sudden disappearance made officers feel that this wasn't a case of confusion or miscommunication. It was deliberate. By mid-afternoon, a lead came in. A signal from Zachary's phone had briefly connected with a tower near Browerville, a remote area in Todd County, nearly 2 hours northwest of Watkins. It was farmland country, quiet, isolated, and surrounded by thick woods and scattered lakes. The sheriff's department in Todd County was notified, and officers were dispatched to search the area. Drones were launched to scan the wide open fields, and officers knocked on doors, asking if anyone had seen the truck. Then came another break. A relative of Zachary's mentioned that the Anderson family owned an old hunting cabin on private land just outside of town. It hadn't been used in years, but the road to it was still accessible. Officers were sent to the property immediately. When they arrived, they found Zachary's truck partially hidden behind a stand of trees. The windows were rolled down, the doors were unlocked, but there was no sign of Zachary or Alayna. Search dogs were brought in. The trail led them toward a cluster of trees behind the cabin. The officers moved quietly, guns drawn, unsure of what they were walking into. The silence in the woods felt unnatural, like something was holding its breath. Time seemed to stretch as they approached the back of the property. What they would find next would end the search and change everything. The woods behind the abandoned cabin were thick with brush and tangled trees, the kind of place where sound didn't carry well. As officers pushed through the overgrowth, the dogs began to bark sharply, signaling they had picked up a strong scent. What had started as a hopeful lead now teetered on the edge of dread. With every step closer to the shed, a heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the rustling of branches and the faint hum of approaching backup. The shed stood crooked and forgotten, its rusted door barely hanging on its hinges. A few tools lay scattered outside, long overtaken by moss and dirt. Behind it, a shallow depression in the ground drew attention. Officers moved in cautiously, their boots sinking into the damp earth. That's when they saw her. Alayna's small body lay partially concealed by brush and fallen leaves. She was still, too still, and the sight of her pale frame under the morning light shattered whatever faint hope had remained. There was no question this was now a murder investigation. Within minutes, the scene was locked down. Crime scene tape was pulled tight around the area. More officers arrived, followed by forensic teams and medical examiners. Investigators worked carefully to preserve every detail. A pink pajama sleeve, a strand of blonde hair, the slight impression of drag marks in the soil, all became pieces of a larger, more horrifying puzzle. The peaceful woods had become a graveyard. Zachary Anderson was located nearby, sitting quietly by a creek less than half a mile from the scene. He didn't run. He didn't resist. His clothes were dirty and stained, his expression unreadable. Officers approached him with weapons drawn, but he made no move to flee or protest. He said nothing as they placed him in handcuffs. The man who had eaten dinner with the Ertl family less than 24 hours ago now sat in the back of a police cruiser, accused of the most unthinkable crime. Word of the discovery spread quickly. Back in Watkins, the command center went silent when the news arrived. Volunteers stopped mid-search, their hearts sinking. Some cried. Others stood in disbelief, staring at their phones as the words "Alayna found deceased" flashed across screens. The Ertl family, waiting in anguish, received the devastating confirmation from the lead investigator personally. No one could prepare a parent for that kind of news. The autopsy revealed a brutal truth. Alayna had been assaulted and strangled. The violence of it contradicted everything people believed about Zachary Anderson. He had no known violent criminal record, no past accusations, no history that hinted at this level of cruelty. He was, to most who knew him, an average man, and that's what made it all the more terrifying. Why Alayna? Why that night? And why would someone so familiar and seemingly harmless commit such a horrific act? The questions were only beginning, but what was certain, what would never change, was that a life so small, so full of joy and promise, had been stolen forever in a moment of unimaginable evil. In the days following Zachary Anderson's arrest, investigators began piecing together a profile of a man who had carefully hidden his darkness. His silence in custody was unsettling. He offered no explanation, no hint of remorse. He simply stared ahead, calm and detached, as if the world around him had nothing to do with him anymore. Detectives hoped his silence was temporary, but as the hours stretched into days, it became clear that Zachary wasn't going to talk. They would have to build the case without his cooperation. What they discovered in his background shocked many. Though he had no prior convictions, his digital footprint told another story. His internet history revealed searches about child abduction, isolation methods, and disturbing content that painted a picture of someone who had been spiraling in secret. Investigators found encrypted chat apps on his phone, though most messages had been deleted or hidden behind layers of password protection. He had gone to great lengths to keep that side of himself hidden. Colleagues at work were stunned. Zachary had always shown up on time, completed his tasks without complaint, and kept mostly to himself. He didn't have many close friends, but he wasn't seen as a threat. Some remembered recent changes in his behavior. He had become more withdrawn, lost weight, and often seemed distracted, but no one could have imagined what he was capable of. A few people recalled conversations where he seemed overly interested in the Ertl family, especially little Alayna. At the time, it hadn't raised alarms. Now it was impossible to forget. Further investigation revealed something even more chilling. Zachary had stayed overnight at the Ertl house once before, just a few months earlier. He had seen Alayna's room, observed the family's routines, and become familiar with the layout of the home. Investigators began to believe the crime was not spontaneous, but planned. The night of the murder, he had waited until everyone was asleep, quietly removed Alayna from her bed, and carried her out of the house without making a sound. The family dog, known to bark at strangers, hadn't reacted. Some theorized Zachary may have spent time with the dog during previous visits to gain its trust. The hunting cabin in Todd County, where Alayna was later found, had not been used in years. Zachary knew the property well. It had belonged to his grandfather. He likely chose it for its isolation and the fact that few people even remembered it existed. To authorities, that level of preparation indicated he had thought this through for some time, possibly fantasized about it before acting. Whether it was a long-standing urge or something triggered more recently remained unclear. The case drew national attention. Media outlets debated how someone so ordinary could be capable of something so monstrous. Experts weighed in, speculating about mental illness, trauma, and repressed urges, but none of it could bring peace to the Ertl family. They didn't care about explanations. All they wanted was justice for their daughter and to understand how no one had seen it coming. As the trial approached, the town braced itself. They would soon hear the full extent of what had happened, and the answers, if they came at all, wouldn't be easy to live with. Zachary Anderson's trial began under heavy security and overwhelming public scrutiny. The courtroom was packed each day with reporters, local residents, and people who had driven in from other towns simply to witness the proceedings. Everyone wanted to understand why a man with no prior criminal record had taken the life of an innocent 5-year-old girl. But the trial, like Zachary himself, offered few answers. He pled guilty without a fight. There was no defense strategy, no attempt to argue insanity, no claims of innocence. The guilty plea was swift and emotionless. He stood before the judge, staring forward with vacant eyes, his voice flat as he admitted to abducting, assaulting, and murdering Alayna Ertl. The courtroom fell silent. The facts were known, but hearing him say it out loud turned something horrific into something even more real. For Alayna's parents, the trial was both a formality and a torture. They didn't need to hear the details. They had lived the nightmare, but they sat in the front row every single day. When it was time for their victim impact statements, the room went still. Alayna Ertl, trembling but composed, described her daughter as joyful, curious, and full of life. She spoke of bedtime stories, messy art projects, and the quiet mornings they used to share. Alan Ertl struggled to speak, but managed to describe the void left in his heart and the torment of having invited the man who took everything from them into their home. There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even the most hardened reporters looked down, visibly shaken. The judge, holding back emotion, handed down a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Zachary showed no reaction, no apology, no tears. Just silence. Outside the courthouse, hundreds gathered holding signs with Alayna's name. They wore purple ribbons, her favorite color, and lit candles as the sun set. The town of Watkins had been changed forever. The playground where Alayna used to play became a memorial. A local artist painted a mural of her smiling face on the side of the elementary school. Each year on the anniversary of her death, a walk is held in her memory. Her family created a foundation in her name to support child safety programs and mental health awareness. Through their grief, they found a way to make sure Alayna's short life would leave a lasting impact. Still, nothing could bring back the little girl who had once filled their home with laughter. The bedroom remained untouched for months, her drawings still taped to the walls, her toys carefully placed where she had last left them. The smallest things, a stray crayon, a forgotten shoe, could send a wave of sadness crashing down without warning. The story of Alayna Ertl became more than a crime. It became a painful reminder that evil can hide in plain sight. That trust, once broken in the worst way, may never fully return. And for the people of Watkins, the memory of one beautiful child, taken too soon, would forever echo in every quiet street, every silent night, and every broken heart left behind.